I'm delighted to have a conversation today with Cate Conte. Cate is an author, a multi-published author of mysteries, and she has a new series that's coming out on June 30th, which debuts with The Witch Hunt. And I have read this book. It's fabulous. It's a departure in so many ways. And so I'm really thrilled to have a conversation with Cate about her writing career, about writing mysteries, about this series in general, and so that we can talk about this from a lot of different angles because there's a lot to talk about. So thank you so much for being here today, Cate.
Oh, thanks, Julie.
Well, I have got to say, and I halfway through this book, and I love it. I
I'm
love
so
the
excited.
departure
Thank you.
that it is for you, because this is your third published series. So can we
Yes.
talk a little bit about your writing career and how it started, and and where you are with it?
Yeah, for sure. So I am also Liz Magavro, and that's the name I originally published under with my very first series, which debuted in 2013. My gosh, it seems so long ago now. So that was called the Positively Organic Mysteries, and it starred a heroine who left her corporate job and somehow found herself baking gourmet treats for dogs and cats. And so she made a whole business out of that, and also solving murders in her new small town. So that was a really fun series for me to write. There's 7 books in it, and that one wrapped up last year. And then from there, I started, while I was still writing that series, I created Cate Conte, and I started writing the Cat Cafe mysteries, because at this point I've been known as the crazy cat lady, I think, but the cat lady at a very minimum. And so my agent had reached out and said he knew of an editor who wanted a cat mystery. And so I had to probe a little bit on that because, that's pretty general. But ultimately we landed on a series about a cat cafe. And it's a little bit of a twist because cat cafes usually are found in more urban areas. They actually started in Japan, in a major city. There's a lot of them in New York City now, all of the more urban areas. And my series is set on an island, a small island off the coast of Massachusetts. So it's kind of an interesting place to put a cat cafe. And there's a lot of rescue components, which is my other love in life, rescuing animals. So I am currently on book 4 of that series, which is coming out in the winter or fall.
Yeah. Now you've got this new series that takes place in a small town in Connecticut. Is it Connecticut?
Yes. Yeah. So it's a fictional town. It's modeled after the town I live in, which is South Norwalk, of course, with a lot of liberties because I needed the town to have the things that I needed in it. So I don't like to use real towns. I like to make them up. And it's a waterfront town, which is the same, but I really like that component of it. And so does Violet, my main character. And her setup is a lot like mine. So she lives in an apartment building where, it's right in the middle of the little downtown area, and her shop is, 2 doors away from her building. Her favorite coffee shop is right around the corner. She's got a yoga studio. So, minus the crystal shop, which I don't have in my real life, everything about her setup is a lot like mine.
So one of the things, you and I are writing friends, and we've known each other for a long time now. And we talk about writing because that's what people are writing.
That's what we do. Writing and how to kill people.
Exactly. We're a little bit scary in that. We can talk about the rules of mysteries and of this subgenre, but one of the things when I teach writing and when I coach writing, I talk about is the world building that we do. Which is an exciting part about starting a new series, deciding where it's at and then what the rules of that world are as far as, the government and what the schools look like and all that kind of stuff. You've added a layer that is so fabulous to this new series because there's also witchcraft and wonderful magic in the series as well. So when you're building this world, why don't you talk a little bit about the premise of the series first, and then let's talk a little bit more about the world building, because world building is bigger than setting and the characters who live there. It's sort of the bubble under which you're telling the stories.
Yeah, and
We make it all up. So you really made up a fabulous world here. So can you let's talk about the premise of the series.
Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of daunting, this world building stuff. So there was a lot to think about. So the premise of the series is my character Violet is a witch, but she doesn't actually know that she's a witch. So she has this crystal shop that she's been running for, I don't know, a few years. She loves it. She's very connected to the stones, and she prides herself on being able to identify for people what stone they need to heal whatever physical or emotional ailment they have. And she's known really as the best in her area. So she's been doing that, but she really has no idea that there's other powers perhaps contributing to how she's doing that. So she finds herself in an unfortunate circumstance where she is actually a murder suspect. And in the process of getting brought down to the station for questioning, she has this necklace that her grandmother gave her when she was a child, and her grandmother told her to never take it off. And she was so nervous when she was getting ready to go to the police station that the necklace broke. And while she was at the police station, her mother, her long lost mother, who she hadn't seen since she was 5, showed up, because apparently when her necklace broke, the spell that had been keeping her mother away was broken. And Violet didn't know any of this. She thought her mother just abandoned her. Her grandmother and her father never told her she was a witch or any of that. She just assumed that her mother didn't want her. And so she hadn't seen her in, 27 years. So when this crazy looking woman and a sister that she didn't even know she had shows up in a shower of glitter outside the police station, she actually thinks she's losing her mind. So now she has to figure out not only who killed this woman in the mortal world, but she has to figure out this whole mystery of her family heritage. And there seems to now be a question of how her grandmother died, because her grandmother was actually a really powerful witch too, and she shouldn't have died. Or she didn't have to die. So there's a lot of questions about her other life. So.
Well, one of the things that I'm enjoying in discovering this world is how seamlessly you let us into this world, because you're telling most of the story through Violet's point of view, first person, but then you'll have some scenes that give the reader some more information that Violet doesn't have, but help you understand, and they don't solve the mystery, but they help you understand this world and what's happening. And you do it so well, and there are just times where I'm like, oh, that happened, or oh, this person's a witch too. Oh, it's fun. I mean, it adds a lot. It adds an unexpected element to the mystery itself, because I don't know what's going to happen.
Right? Oh, you're too kind. Yeah, it was fun. So when this series started, my editor and I were talking about what it might look like, and he was really all about the mother-daughter kind of bewitched sort of thing. So that's really where I started when I started thinking about it. And I was always fascinated with Samantha and being able to twitch her nose and show up halfway across the world. And so I'm like, well, Violet has to be able to do that. But her mom, she's actually a really powerful witch as well. And so she has some points of view in the book. And so for me, that was a way for, to keep the reader kind of abreast of what was happening outside of what Violet had yet to find out. And it gave it that element, I think, of, I didn't want to go too full on bewitched, but it gave it that element of Samantha and Endora's doing things behind the scenes that Samantha doesn't know about. And I always really liked that dynamic. So I thought that would be fun to play with.
Well, and I love that dynamic too. I remember that series and trying to twitch my nose as a small child.
Yeah, me too, and I could never do it.
I was convinced that's why I couldn't do anything interesting. Because I think when we talk about witchcraft and witch, there are elements of that, and there are belief systems and crystals and things that we can understand in this mortal world and discover. But I loved that you amped it up by adding the magic to it. so that it's as much an adventure for the reader to see what else can happen that's unexpected, and how does she keep living the life that she leads and loves, knowing that she can do these other things.
Yeah, one of the most fun scenes for me in the book was it was a small scene, and it was Violet's sister, her sister that she didn't know about, Zoe, comes over or appears in her apartment for breakfast, and she, blinks her eyes and creates this whole spread of food, but she didn't pour the coffee, and so Violet goes up to get the coffee, and her sister says, "Come on, really? You can't just bring it to you." And so Violet was like, "Well, I didn't think I could, but I'm going to try it." And she actually created herself a perfect, she in her mind poured the coffee, and so it was perfectly in the cup. And so we actually commented on how perfectly she was able to do that on her first try. So that was kind of funny because I would love to be able to just think about coffee and pour myself a cup. So.
Or say, "Oh gosh, I'd love to eat this," and not have to.
Yes, and have it show up. Yeah. Although that could be dangerous after a while.
But I also, I find, and I'm feeling as though one of the things that readers are going to love in this series is that Violet's on a real journey of self-discovery and figuring stuff out that I think is intriguing and really interesting.
Yeah, she's got a lot to learn. So, one of the things she's wrestling with a lot of things, but, the fact that at first she doesn't really believe her mother. She feels like, well, if you're my mother, then what could keep you away? She didn't understand that her grandmother was equally as, if not more powerful than her mother, and why her grandmother put a spell on this necklace to keep her mother away. And there's a whole story about that. And then she doesn't really know what her mother's up to. So she can't be sure she can trust her. Now she feels like she doesn't know if she could trust her grandmother's passed away at this point, but she feels like everything she's known is just not what she thought, and so she's got to figure out who to actually trust.
Right. And at 32 to have your whole life upended like that is, I think that that's a relatable journey to people. Not as drastically as your mother is a witch and shows up one day, but still, to question everything is a lot for her.
Yeah, and then part of it's finding out that a lot of her fellow townspeople that she's interacted with for her most of her life are also witches, and so that's interesting, especially when she finds out that someone who's been working pretty closely with her is also a witch and has also been in contact with her mom. And she feels a little betrayed by that, so she has to work through that as well.
Yeah, no, lots. And so is the world that you're building, is this like a witch friendly place for people to live, or in this world are witches everywhere and this just happens to be one community?
Yeah, so the way I see it is there are witches everywhere, but some, there are some communities where they kind of gravitate more towards, and this is one of them. And there's a scene at the beginning where she's sitting in her friend's coffee shop, and she notices or comments on the fact that he's got a little mason jars with fairy lights in every window. And later she finds out why that is. So it's all part of the witchy community.
That's so great. And did you base all of that knowledge on, did you make it all up? Did you take some facts from here and some things you'd read here and some stories you'd read there and combine them? How did you create those rules for that world?
It's funny because I sometimes feel like my imagination isn't as as good as it should be. I felt like I was reaching a lot for, you feel so confined to the world you're in sometimes that it's hard to think about, just let yourself think about how crazy things could be if you just let it. I used to spend a lot of time in Salem, Mass. So I went to college in Salem, Mass. And so I've always been obsessed with witches and, all of that fun stuff. I've spent a lot of time learning about the moon, and there's actually a restaurant down the street from me that has those little mason jars in the window with the fairy lights, and that's kind of where I got that idea. So just pulling from different things and trying to kickstart my imagination to to let myself go a little wild and not think about how it should be in immortal constraints.
And this is your third series, and there's multiple points of view, some in first, some in third, this information gathering, this building a whole different, the magical realism. Do you feel like you were able to do this because you'd written 2 other series and built those worlds, and you have the tech, the ability and the tools to sort of figure out this new process, this new world?
Yeah, I always wanted to write multiple points of view, but the genre that we're in doesn't always allow for it. So, I kind of took a chance and figured I'd see how it went and if I could get away with it, and I did. So, so I'm happy about that. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely built different worlds in my other series, and so I kind of started with the immortal world because I'm more used to that, and I'm still figuring out the other world as Violet discovers new things about her other life. I have to figure them out for her as well, so we're both in sync.
So we talked about, you've mentioned a couple of times the genre in which we both write. And so let's talk about that a little bit, because that does have rules. Um, I actually like the rules because it makes it easier to tell the stories. We write traditional mysteries, then the subgenre is called cozies. I think that this work is, it also has that magical realism. So I think that there's I don't want to pigeonhole this book too much because I think it has a lot of audiences. But some of the rules that we write in are a community of people that you visit in every book, that it's got to have a mystery. There can't be too much violence. That romance is, left off the page, not on the page. It's there, but there's no sex, there's no swearing, or if there is, it's just a little bit.
Which is the hardest for me.
And I know when you write that thriller, it's going to be full of F-bombs, but
Yeah.
but the other thing is that it needs to be a mystery. Like you need to set it up so that the reader is guessing, and at the end, the solution is revealed, and the reader feels tricked, but not. They feel like, oh, oh, shoot, I missed that, or she mentioned that here. So those are the rules of the road that we both write in, and we both write under different names, which is fun. Did you find in this that your mystery, because you do the things, right? Like I knew who the victim was going to be when after she walked into the coffee shop. I'm like, oops,
she's out of here.
Because you have to pick somebody that a lot of people would want to do away with. Otherwise, it's hard to write a mystery. If it's oh, there's only one person who'd want to kill that person. It's like, oh, that's not a mystery. Did you find that these rules helped you in building this book, or did they, did it constrain you, with some of the limitations, or are you thrilled that you're sort of painting a new canvas?
Yeah, no, I don't feel it constrained me at all. I think it actually helped because, one of the things I'm trying to do with the book is, so each book is having a mortal mystery that gets solved at the end of the book, but there's a bigger mystery going on in the witch world that's going to span multiple books. So that's been interesting because I'm writing book 2 right now. It's actually due in just over 30 days. So we're still working on that one. But, trying to figure out how to pace that and, what parts to reveal in which book so the mystery continues to, carry on and also support Violet's development. It's been really an interesting and fun adventure rather than just writing a straight up mystery where, somebody dies and then by the end it's all solved and everyone's happy again. There's still stuff going on in the background that doesn't get solved at the end of these. So.
And usually when we write these kinds of books, you have a 2 or 3 or 4 book, contract, so that that you're going to arc a story over those 2 or 3 or 4 books, which is also the fun part. It's like, yeah. What are we ultimately going to solve? And it can be a small thing or it can be a big thing, like, oh, I'm a witch, Yeah. Let me figure that out. I think it works really well for a cozy series. I think it's going to be a huge hit. It's just terrific. When a few more of the elements that I think were so great and well used. I love the idea of the crystal shop, and I know that you love the idea of a crystal shop too. So we could talk about that, about the moons and the power of the moon phases. That's something I've been learning more about, astrology and the power of the moons, and witches themselves, and you know what that looks like. So what drew you to having Violet own a crystal shop?
I'm a crystal addict, so I love crystals. I have them everywhere. I use them for everything. It's something I've always been obsessed with rocks. So can I tell my rock story from when I was a kid? The one that I put on the book. So when I was little, my mother got me a doll carriage and some dolls to go in it. And so one day we were out for a walk. I think I was probably 5 or 6. We were out for a walk, and I had my doll carriage, and this lady stopped us, and was wing and eyeing over me, and she wanted to see my dollies. So I take the blanket. I don't remember this. My mother loved to tell the story. She said I took the blanket and pulled it back, and there was a whole collection of rocks in the carriage. So the lady thought I was very strange. My mother still thinks I'm very strange, but I've always loved rocks. So now I just buy them instead. Well, I do still pick them up on the street, actually, or the beach. I love getting rocks from the beach. It's just about connecting to the stone. Like I know a lady who owns a crystal shop nearby, and I call her my supplier. But she always says it doesn't matter how big the stone is or how fancy it is. It's just that you connect to it that matters.
I think it's letting yourself connect to it too, because you've gotten me exploring crystals a little bit more, and like my malas that I wear, and because it can be what you believe it to be, but I do think that it's wonderful to have something you can hold or put in your pocket that makes you feel better and makes you feel stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. I have my whole desk, so I have a day job, as you know. And my desk is just littered with crystals. And every time something happens, which it usually does, I'm always playing with some rock to make myself feel better. And so I use them all the time.
Yeah. And a crystal shop is something that not every community would have. Several do. I mean, if you have ever been to Salem, Massachusetts, there's more than one. But I love that that's her vibe. Like, she already knew that enough about her, that this was a skill she had, and also reading people's auras, which was a skill she had.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm still figuring out exactly where this is going, but the auras is also, I mean, all of it's part of her witchy heritage, but there's something about in her human form, she understands it as reading auras, but as she learns more about herself in the witch world, there's something really special about how and what she can see in people that makes her like a way more powerful witch than anybody even really understands at this point. So
I love that.
And that's going to come out in a future book.
I also, one of my favorite parts, well, I have many favorite parts, but one of the parts of the book that I loved reading was when Violet goes to yoga and, does all kinds of things, and her mother's asking her what event she's going to be doing. She says, well, I'm doing a healing circle. And her mother, who's a witch, kind of looks at her like, what's that woo-woo stuff? It's like, even witchy mothers can side eye their children.
Well, I think her mother Fiona is very to the point, right? So in her mind, and she says this herself, like when she was younger, part of the reason why she and Violet are estranged is the way that she was when she was younger. And she's very, in her mind, if you want to heal a community, just put a freaking spell on them. Like that's kind of, and she knows she shouldn't do that. She knows that there's a limit to how much, you can step into the affairs of mortals, but she kind of thinks it's a waste of time. And there's other ways you could get them to do what you want.
So it's interesting because those rules you're going to make up as well, like how much you can do and how much you can't do and what happens when you overstep. I mean, that's all part of your world building, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm still figuring a lot of that out. But her sister is more, so the book I'm writing now, her sister is now getting more involved in trying to solve mysteries, but she's not above using her other techniques to do it. So that's going to get her in a little bit of trouble, I think. Especially since she starts dating one of the cops in town who doesn't know she's a witch. So
That can be tricky. Like that's a
Yeah.
heck of a thing to bring up on a date, isn't it?
Yep.
Um, so would you say that Violet's sidekick is her mother, or is it her sister, or is it, because most of our amateur sleuths have a Watson who's also part of it, or several of them. So do you think it's both of them? Is it other people in town as well?
Yeah, in the first book, it's not either of them because she doesn't really trust them. So it's more of the people that she's always surrounded herself with. So she's got her best friend who lived across the hall until her mother mysteriously moved her somewhere else. And then she's got her friend at the coffee shop and her friend Josie that actually mentored her as she was learning about crystals. And she works with her. And so those are kind of her sidekicks to start with. And then, in book 2, I think Zoe has been showing up more as that kind of sidekick. So,
Well, it's a really wonderful, wonderful debut for this new
thank you.
series. I mean, I just loved it. And I wish you all the best. And I love talking about writing with you. And I'm fortunate because with my writing friends, I get sneak previews into things. But I will admit, when you told me about this, I was like, I don't know how she's going to do this, but it's really, really terrific. So
Thank you.
congratulations, my friend Cate Conte, on The Witch Hunt, which is out on June 30th.
Thank you.